So hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast. I hope you're well. I'm certainly enjoying myself at the moment. I hope you guys are well and enjoying yourselves right now. And there's so much that we've got to talk about in the F1 world. Of course, the recording of this episode is happening before the Miami Grand Prix, although you will be seeing this afterwards. So I think for the benefit of those of you that would have seen the Miami Grand Prix by the time this comes out, we can always chuck in a few little predictions and pretend reactions to a Grand Prix that may or may not happen in the way that we describe it. But nonetheless, we'll get into that momentarily after, try and be a bit creative thinking, I suppose. But anyway, just as a casual reminder, we are the independent podcast that aims to bring you all of the news, gossip and events in the Formula One world and relay that back to you for your listening or viewing pleasure, depending of course on which platform you choose to follow us on. And now, guys, without further ado, I've got a great guest on that I'm really looking forward to interviewing, a man who's had several years' experience, over a decade in Formula One as part of race strategy, and in particular, a former head of race strategist at Haas F1, including stints at Mercedes and Honda as well. It's Mr. Mike Caulfield joining us. Mike, first of all, mega excited and grateful to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm good, thanks. It's been a good season so far, so it's quite enjoyable watching it from this side, especially.
Yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to getting your take on what's going on in F1 today, especially from your perspective, not having to worry about working at the pit wall, and you can enjoy it as a fan like the rest of us. But on the subject of being created about Miami, I mean, what a race that was. Who would have thought Haas would have got their first 1-2 at Miami on home soil? I didn't think Mick Schumacher had it in him, but what did you make of it?
I always knew he had it in him. Yeah, an amazing result. I think it's probably because I've left, to be honest. That's why I've done it. So, but yeah, it's cracking. Really good upturning form this year from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, of course, guys, there's plenty of different scenarios that we've put in for this one. So if this is the one that you are hearing, then by all means, that's probably the one that went true. At least fingers crossed anyway. Maybe there was water at the marina. Who knows at Miami? We'll have to wait and see. But Mike, obviously, the reason why we've got you on the show is obviously I'm really intrigued by some of the stories that you'll have to tell us, and obviously your experience as a race strategist in Formula One, head of race strategy, I mentioned as well at Haas F1. And for the benefit of some of our regular listeners who might not understand what that entails, could you summarize for us what a race strategist does specifically, if you can sum it up in a small way?
I mean, in a small way, I think the easiest way to obviously most people's understanding of it is they're the race strategists are the ones who call the pit stops and call the tyre order and when to stop in a race. I mean, I think that's the end result of your job in a weekend is trying to get that and trying to gain the best result you can for your team. And then obviously there's a lot more which we could talk about for a long time, the preparation which goes in before that aspect of it. But yeah, the easiest way to sum it up to the race strategist is, I mean, if you think about it like a game of chess, you're trying to outmaneuver other teams and get the best result.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to sum it up. I don't really know much in terms of what goes into the day-to-day plan. And of course, it'd be great to get your insight on some of that as well. But as you mentioned, the ultimate result is to make sure that you develop the best strategy for your team, optimize the performance on race day, and obviously bring home the best result, which I'm sure many other race strategists like yourself in Formula One and other sports as well will obviously have many sleepless nights trying to go through all of the data that's collated, all of the sim work and everything else, especially with new parts going on these cars and going from one circuit to another. How much effort that must require in order to produce something that many people probably overlook because of the whether or not the race goes to plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you summed up, I think that this year with the change of regs as well, everyone's coming in a little bit more blind this season compared to the last couple of seasons where it was started to be a bit more of a settled picture. You generally knew where the performance were of the cars. Obviously, with COVID and everything happening, developments weren't happening as heavily, purely because people are also kind of concentrating on this year as well. Whereas this year, we're now on these new regulations, and it's obviously a steep. This part of the curve is a steep development curve. So you're still trying to understand your own car. You're still trying to understand others' cars. As we've seen already this year, there may be some circuits which suit cars other than more specifically than others. So each weekend you're not as confident as maybe where you're going to be. You kind of see like the Haas result where they're really strong in the first couple of races and then had a bit of a dip in Melbourne, but then recovered it a little bit in Imola. You're still trying to work out our team specifically stronger in a kind of qualifying format, and then the race pace drops away a little bit, or vice versa. The race pace is stronger and they're struggling on that one lap pace, a little bit like the Mercedes. It has that little bit more pace in a race than it does in qualifying. So yeah, especially this year with these new aspects of it, there is that more unknowns coming into it. So there's requires more the planning of trying to worry more what if scenarios. Really, we're trying to counter for. You obviously know quite well how your own car's performing. You have all the information on your own car. You have all the information of how upgrades are performing and where you are relative to your expectations as a team coming into it. What you don't know is where other people are sitting. So you're trying to use those practice sessions to, first of all, see if they brought some new upgrades, see if they're running different rear wings. So you're trying to collect that data to see where they're aiming for and then where they're positioned. Are they looking where you expected them going into the weekend? Are they looking a little bit faster than yourselves? And everything kind of a strategist does on a weekend, or a team does on a weekend, is your relative placing, really. So you obviously can do the best job you can. You'll try and extract as much pace as you can. But ultimately, if another team extracts a second of pace somehow, or brings an upgrade, which is quite significant, that puts you in a different position regardless. Obviously, you can get things wrong on your car and you can always try and extract a bit more out. You'll never get a perfect setup because that F1 car setup's all about compromise and it's just trying to get that best place and see where you fit. And maybe you might be kind of thinking you're half a tenth behind another car, so you're trying to eke out that little bit more performance, which just gives you that edge. And that's kind of where a strategist's role comes in as well. But they'll try and look at this competitor analysis, feed it back into the race engineers and that aspect to say, well, a little bit off there, we're a little bit performance lacking in that bit. Is there any more we can bring? And you kind of, like I said, everything's relative to each other, because obviously that gives you that best overall finishing position.
Well, that's kind of it, isn't it? Because I always find it fascinating, especially in testing, when or pre-season testing, if you like, where everybody's doing their programs, everyone's trying to test to push their cars as far as they feel they need to, make sure that the CFD runs and the sim runs, all the correlation from the sims, compared to what's happening on track. And at the same time, you're trying to keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. But in your opinion, or from your experience, Mike, how much do F1 teams, when they go testing, really know about the competition relative to the performance of their own car?
I mean, obviously the last couple of years, so again, back to this year, with such big changes, the more unknowns. Then last year we only had one pre-season test before the season. So again, there's little time, which one day was a sandstorm, so you kind of lost, and then another half a day of it. Bahrain's very different conditions. In the past, when you used to have 2-3 tests of 4 days each, by the end of the running, you were starting to get quite a good picture because you're just building up data and data. You see people doing high fuel runs, like race simulations. And as soon as you see someone doing a race simulation, you're like, okay, I've got a high confidence what their fuel level is, because you need to be at least this amount of fuel level to get to the end of the race. And then you start doing kind of your relative comparisons between your high fuel and low fuel to get that idea of where they're going. Obviously, with modern F1 cars as well, there's lots of things you can tune. So they could be running a different engine mode. So obviously between engine manufacturers, so obviously Ferrari own one, so Haas and Ferrari and Alpha. Well, you don't know what they're running, you can do it relative to us. So you know when you're running a specific engine mode and you see someone else's straight line speed of the same engine, go, okay, they're running the same engine mode as us here. Gives us a good idea that they haven't got a little bit more. But sometimes you might see like a Mercedes or a Ferrari or someone generally who are a bit more confident about their pace. They will. I don't like the term sandbagging, because it's not sandbagging. It's just that they don't need to push it all. It's often about a reliability thing in that sense. They don't want to push it to the extremes. They don't want to kind of give away you are always trying to hide little bits and pieces of information because you want to make it difficult for everyone else. It's not you're trying to kid yourself. It's not that you're overconfident about something. You're trying to create more work for other people because everyone's going to be trying to look and see where they stand, and to know where they stand, you have to work out where other people stand. So you don't want to give away what your fuel load is. You don't want to give away what your engine mode is, or if you're potentially like running a different rear wing or something, like obviously that's seen on track, so you can't hide that much. But it was the old scenarios where in testing everyone used to put the screens up on the car. You want to make things harder for everyone else. That's the competitive element of it. It's not a case of, I see sometimes comments, people going, "Oh, the sandbagging," and it's like, yes, in a sense, but not because not because they're so overly confident, but they're suddenly going to find a second half. Because at the same time as well, if you're not pushing the car to like the qualifying extremes or the limits of the car, you might not find what actual potential issues you have on your car. So you have to run it to a certain point where you go, "Oh, can we our engine run at the higher engine mode for X amount, or are we going to get temperature issues?" So a lot of testing is obviously about running all these systems, making sure your temperatures are all in line, which is why running in somewhere like Bahrain compared to Barcelona is a good aspect of it, because you have much more relevant temperatures for the season rather than Barcelona in February, which generally isn't that relevant. So yeah, in answer to your question, sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but by the time you get to the end of testing, you'll have a generally good idea of where you stand, and you'll have some confidence, and you'll have some unknowns as well. There's some teams as well, but you generally just can't get a read on. Like, I think, so I still do it. I did a bit of analysis on testing this year, and I wasn't too far out. But again, you saw quite a big swing from Barcelona to Bahrain, and it was just a kind of changing conditions. So McLaren were strong in Barcelona, and then they were obviously awful in Bahrain. So you're kind of thinking, right, they weren't just running super light in Barcelona. It was just a circuit that suited them. And then they came to Bahrain and they had issues with temperature, and seen by the race, not just temperature. I think it was a track which didn't quite suit their car, or they just couldn't quite get the setup right on it. So that was like, you came after Bahrain test, and you're like, well, where are they? Because I thought they were good, and now they're struggling. So you kind of edge the bets and you question yourself a little bit. And then Alpine as well, like, you saw a couple of runs with them and you're kind of thinking, oh, they look okay, but I'm not quite sure. They didn't do anything spectacular, but they didn't do anything really slow. And then you obviously had the Haas and Alfa Romeo, which putting some absolutely stonking lap times in, and you go, okay, are they running super light or are they not running light? And you kind of, are they actually genuinely competitive? And as you saw in the race in Bahrain, they were genuinely competitive. So you kind of just try and break it down bit by bit. And I think most teams, coming into it were, I don't think there was two surprises. I think obviously the surprises, everyone came out for Mercedes, and then based on history, it's like, oh, Mercedes are hiding something. Whereas actually now you've proven that no, Mercedes issues in Bahrain were true. So they weren't hiding something that was genuine. And Ferrari and Red Bull pace in testing was genuine. So it's kind of, like I said, people don't intentionally try. They need to get through a program. They want to run things as relative as possible. So they won't be deliberately running stupid things to try and hide things from others, but they will try and make things harder for us to discover what the genuine pace is.
Well, this is it, and I find it really, really fascinating, and I appreciate, such a detailed response. I mean, I'm one of those people that tends to go a long way around asking questions, so a long answer is certainly not going to be a problem for me. But I always find it fascinating, this, how can I put it, this sort of consensus that, particularly in the turbo hybrid era, especially with a team like Mercedes, where there's such an expectation on them to be on the pace from the get-go, or if they're not quite there yet, it's a case of they're just going through the motions, understanding their programs better, they're holding back their performance, and then come the first race of the season, they're beating the field by a second, as they did at the prime in the early 2014-2016 era, for example. And you often get other teams like Alfa Romeo, you mentioned. Ferrari's another team that has a tendency sometimes to run a little bit lighter than some of the other teams. So you always feel like there's a false dawn expected in those teams. And of course, when they come to that first race and you see that Ferrari had the car to beat, and Mercedes were struck almost a second off the pace. It was a huge surprise to a lot of people this year. So in my mind, I kind of feel like, from your perspective on the pit wall, and you're monitoring everything, you're checking the GPS to see who's quick and who isn't, that do you sort of take into account what those teams historically would normally run in previous tests to kind of help give you a better understanding as to what they're doing now? Or do you just go in with an open mind in that, well, we just have to go judge them on their merits and then just see what happens on the first race?
It's a bit of both. So F1 teams by nature are creatures of habit. So you'll generally see that every year they'll come to it is like the test programs for testing are the same or similar. They're like, they'll have the systems test they want to run through. They want to do their operations test. They'll have a checklist of things they want to check off, and like that, and they'll go through it. And F1 teams won't vary it too much. They're all right. There might be a couple of new tests they add in, or a couple of ones which aren't relevant anymore, which they'll remove. And it's the same kind of thing with fuel loads. You'll get to it and you're like, well, this worked for us last year. It's a good fuel load. It's something we know. It's something we can compare ourselves against previous ones. Obviously, with this year with the reg change, again, you potentially wanting to see how well this relates to your previous iteration of a car. You obviously have some good ideas from your wind tunnel and your computer sims, but until it runs on track, you don't get that kind of ultimate performance. So in that sense, you'll go into testing with kind of a historical pattern of what people do. Now that obviously doesn't mean, because you can change lots of things. So fuel load, someone might drop it by 10 kilos, or someone might decide that this year actually for the low fuel runs they're gonna go down low and just do some lap. And this can also depend on internal things as well. So your general running, I think everyone will generally run the same. There won't be too much dissimilar with it, but at that point there's not a huge amount to gain, because it's kind of, this is people doing their kind of systems tests, their aero checks. So they'll be running kind of a middle of road fuel load, and they're not pushing it. The drivers aren't pushing for the limit. They're trying to get understanding of how the tyres are performing, what the degradation is done, and it's basically just runs for the team's knowledge. It's not runs to see where they are relative to others. Once you start going down to your low fuel running, you might you might half the fuel load again in that sense, and that's when it starts becoming interesting, because then you get a bit of a variance in what engine modes people run and what tyre compounds people run. Because some people you'll see will do a full burn qualifying sim. It'll literally be out lap, fast lap, in, and then you're kind of saying, well, obviously if the best case scenario for other teams is that they've got enough fuel to do that qualifying sim, more likely that they've got more fuel than that, they can do it. And then you'll have other teams who might do that, to go out, do a fast lap, and it'll be a really fast lap, and then they'll actually go into a run after it and do another 6 laps in it. And that tends to worry people, because like, whoa, they weren't super low fuel on that one. So it depends what your confidence is. And then there's obviously the just general F1 aspect of it is you can have, obviously if you're a team that's wanting to get a bit of publicity and sponsors, or trying to appease your sponsors, you might go for a bit more of that performance runs. That's why you generally see your teams like your Mercedes and Red Bull don't need to go for that headline time, but it's always good for a team like your Alfa Romeo or your Alpine or your Haas to get that one, because at the end of the day, even though doesn't mean anything, but it's great having that Autosport article saying Haas P1 in end of testing, or like Bottas quicker than Mercedes kind of thing. And it's just that kind of clickbait stuff, but it pleases the sponsors. So you got your picture there, you got your sponsors there. So there is a little bit of that from other teams potentially. And then the final one you mentioned with the kind of Ferrari, you can get that pressure from your team. You can have that kind of political pressure that, okay, we want to G up a bit of morale here, so it'd be nice for us. We're not just hovering the mid-pack kind of. So we'd like to get a good time in there. And then, because also with those ones with the big teams, it'll be amazing. Like, you go to your Mercedes, your Ferrari, Red Bull, and you get some communication of what the run plan is and stuff, but you won't get the ins and outs. They'll they see as much as the fans do sometimes go, oh yeah, we're quickest today. They won't like have time because they're designing parts, they're doing their aero stuff. They're not sitting there looking at what the run plan is and what engine mode we're running and what fuel load it was. So sometimes it's that kind of aspect of just to kind of obviously show people their work is working well. We want to be performing to the level which people are expecting to us. We don't want people getting distracted from the work and going, hang on a minute, how come we're only 14th today? And it's like, and so there's that little bit of political side of things as well in it. But yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, if I have any doubts or any concerns about who's looking quick in testing come next season, I'm definitely coming to you first, Mike, and just say, like, here's a rundown. Who do you think's quick and who isn't? Because, no, I love that. That was brilliant. I want to sort of segue this into the icebreaker question, because I know we've already had a bit of an icebreaker discussion already, but I have one for this show that we use with a couple of our guests, and I want to run this one by you as well. And I'm quite intrigued because of your history, of course, working with Honda, Mercedes, and Haas, so it might be interesting to see what answer that you give me. So here it is. If I was to give you an F1 car to drive around any circuit in the world that you want to, and it doesn't have to be an F1 circuit, and this can be any F1 car in history, and you don't have to worry about learning how to run it properly or the best settings, or, you know, you're the best driver in the world, you can drive any car that you want. What car would you drive, and where would you like to drive it?
Okay, that's a good question. That's not really something I've ever thought about. Does it have to be a car I've worked with, or just any car?
No, it can be any car that you like.
Any car that I like. Wow. I mean, yeah. Wow. I think you're going back to the kind of Senna McLaren era. Is that's the kind of the traditional that those cars. I just think like the kind of V12 era, V10, just that noise, that kind of basic. You just see them going around and like having to change gear, and that'd be, I think, spectacular to kind of drive in that respect. And circuit, I mean, if I was a good driver, I'd clearly say Monaco, because it just frightens the hell out of me. And like, but just being that close to the barriers and that kind of aspect of it. And if I knew I had the confidence and skill level to get around, I'd love to be able to take around Monaco. I think that'd be great. But just in an overall one, I think it's just traditional. I like Silverstone as well. I've been around Silverstone so many times on my push bike. It's kind of actually to be driving it and see the speed difference going down like Hanger Straight and in that respect, and just the kind of home race, driving it around there with a crowd as well would be obviously be great, cheering me on.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. You know, it's probably nothing better than the idea of driving down the Hanger Straight, heading into Stowe Corner, and then onto the Hamilton Straight now, as rightly named, to a roaring ovation from the Silverstone crowd. But it's funny you mention Silverstone. I think everybody I've asked that question to so far has always come back with Silverstone. So if it's all right with you, Mike, I'm going to take Monaco as your unofficial answer. That's all right.
Okay, like Monaco. Yeah, I mean, Monaco. Like Monaco circuit is amazing. Like just to kind of, I mean, just I think the reason I say is I always watch the onboards and you just see how close they get to the barriers, and just like, I mean, I struggle enough to get around on the PlayStation, let alone like drive it, like knowing that I physically could wreck a car, and like and just to see how they do it is just, I mean, I think that that's the kind of, just shows the skill level they got, how close they get to those barriers, and how they can just pinpoint it, and just it'd be utterly frightening, but actually also if you could accomplish it, would be amazing.
Well, there's just something about Senna, McLaren, Monaco. It's as pure and as dangerous as it gets, and yet if that doesn't bring people to F1, then obviously nothing will, quite frankly. No, I love that one, actually. It's a really, really good answer, Mike, I must admit. But I'll let you have the Silverstone one as well in there as well. So I'll put that one as a Monaco/hyphen in a McLaren MP4-4, 89 McLaren, or 88, whichever one it was. But yeah, legendary cars nonetheless. So, I mean, that's brilliant. Absolutely love that. And obviously, as I've mentioned already, you've had stints working with Honda, Mercedes, obviously a few championships along the way in that time in the turbo hybrid era, and obviously some time at Haas as well. Currently, what are you up to at the moment? Because you're not, we were talking just before we went on air, and you weren't actually affiliated with specifically with an F1 team right now, exclusively.
Correct. Yeah. So I left Haas just before the end of last season. Just so I'm now going in and still very involved with the sport. So working for a company who basically does the kind of strategy software. Yes, I see it on TV. So a number of F1 teams use it. So still working with strategists in sense, so chatting to them most weeks, like while not providing strategic advice or stuff, we're still talking and providing a bit of guidance on the software, trying to improve the software itself and that kind of sports analysis side of things. What using my knowledge and experience of what else you want to see live, what you want to see for like post processing, and how we can improve that aspect of it and give them the best information they can, really. So it's kind of like a bit of the best of both worlds. There's certain bits obviously I do miss of the other aspect of it, but it's still getting to be involved with the sport each weekend and still chatting with a lot of people involved in it. So you're still very much involved without being directly sat on the pit wall now. So yeah, that's basically it, really.
Well, it sounds exciting, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just cutting you off before.
No, so I was going to say, just also looking into kind of with the company as well, we're starting to look at IndyCar and NASCAR and those other series as well to see how they differ and how they can help out with teams over that side of the pond, really, as well. So, which is quite an interesting challenge. It's a few similarities and a few differences between the sports.
Yeah, it sounds really, really exciting. I'm obviously not going to pick your brain to go into too many details on that one, especially the differences between the two, because I often find IndyCar quite fascinating. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, Mike, I'm one of those fans that will tune in every so often if there's not an F1 race on or when the Indy 500 comes around. And I know that's a completely different game to what we see on the day-to-day in Formula One.
Yeah. So I'm still a fairly... I admit, obviously, when I used to work in F1, when the intense schedule of it, and kind of once I got home, my other interest in other motorsport series was dwindled in that respect. Needed a bit of downtime, so I didn't get involved in that much too much. But obviously, being back now, being away for it, and starting to get into the kind of IndyCar world is, it's been interesting to kind of see it. And it's like I said, I'm very much the same. I'm still learning as well about it. There's still differences that still surprise me, and I'm still trying to figure out what kind of the ins and outs, especially in the strategy side of things, of what like dominates it and what differences there are to F1 and what my knowledge in F1 could potentially bring to IndyCar in that respect. But still very much a learning process in that one.
Yeah, very much so. I was actually quite intrigued. There's something you just mentioned there about the sort of scheduling constraints and difficulties that F1 causes if you're working in the sport, that there's so many races going on at the moment. If you don't mind me asking, is that part of the reason perhaps why you decided to move into more of a consultancy role rather than sort of the day-to-day working with an F1 team?
Yes, it's... it is a little bit, yeah. It wasn't like a pure decision. There was just a number of aspects of it, but the way the season was going and the way, the scheduling was happening, I've been like you mentioned, Ivana, I've been ultimately doing it for close to 15, 16 years, and it's kind of a case of I just needed a bit of a break. I just reached that point where I just realised I just needed to kind of step away for a little bit. And I think part of it, the last couple of years with COVID, obviously made it even more difficult because you were starting to get even more restraints in the kind of travelling side of things. So you were travelling to places and you were under a lot of restrictions, or you were going out to places and you're having to get COVID tests, obviously, before you went out there, which made things even more difficult because you're having to kind of, your free weekend, you were having to turn up at the factory to go and do a COVID test to allow you to travel. So you effectively lost an extra day in that respect because you couldn't make plans on your free weekend. And it just has that kind of knock-on effect and that kind of cumulative effect in terms of how it drains people. And it's a difficult one, because I understand the push and I understand the love of the sport, and I understand that people would love to see a race every weekend, like the fans, I mean, and it's like, but it's not like, I think the best way I try to explain it to someone is that it's not like kind of football or something like that, where for football, okay, footballers, for a start, I mean, their lifespan in the sport is 10, 15 years, and they're getting paid on the big guys anyway, but they're getting thousands and thousands of pounds a week. Like, F1 engineers do not get paid thousands and thousands of pounds a week. No matter how much I've seen on Twitter that someone responded me to the other week because I made a comment about the schedule. I think it was after the one where it could become 30 races a week, and someone went, "Oh yeah, you're living the life, you're traveling the world, getting your 7-figure salary," and I was just like, "Whoa." If you really believe that F1 engineers are getting 7-figure salaries, then there's not that much money in the sport. It's and you've got to realize that everyone in the sport as well is like, they got into the sport because they obviously love the sport, but it is a job, and it is obviously, it's a great job, and you're very privileged to get it. There's not many people do it, but I mean, your mechanics and your kind of garage technicians and stuff, they can be away for about 210 days a year, and that's away from home. So for a start, you need a very understanding family to do that. So if you've got a young family, you're away from them a lot. That puts a lot of pressure on you as well. And then when you get back home, you then have to have all your day-to-day life obligations. And it's just, I was chatting to someone the other day who started in F1 in the early 90s, so one of the veterans. And in that day, obviously, there was 15, 16 races a year. And then there was testing, obviously, on top of that, which was unlimited testing. But at that point, you had your test team and your race team. There was like very little crossover between it. And he said, like, the schedule which is now, even though it's the same 3-day format or whatever, he said the workload then compared to now was fine. You could easily kind of do it. It was like, it wasn't anything which was a worry, because your season started in March, April and finished in October, and it was every other weekend. There was none of this kind of, it was the odd back to back, but most of it, again, because most of it was in Europe, it was trucking it around, and you weren't traveling far from places, and like kind of, and he said to me, it's like, I mean, I class myself as still relatively young, but I've noticed it myself. You'll get mechanics now who come into the sport, they've done the junior formula, want to do F1, they come into F1, will join for 2-3 years and go, great, done it now. I've travelled the world, I've got my F1 experience, I've done it, tick that box. I'll now go and work for Mercedes or Bentley road cars or Jaguar Land Rover, get paid just as much as I'm getting paid in F1, but I actually now only work a 35-hour week and I have all my weekends to myself. And it's that case that you're now seeing less and less people do this as a solid 30-year career now. Yeah, and ultimately you'll get to a point where the quality is going to start dropping as well, because you can start having that turnover so often, but you don't have the people building that experience and the knowledge and the bringing people through, because you're going to lose those. Gradually, the experienced heads who were here 10, 20 years ago are going to eventually retire. They're going to get to a point and go, I'm too old to do this now, because it is a strain on them, even, and especially if they've been doing it 20 years, as I found. Like, I only travelled for 5, but I did, when I was at Mercedes and before, I was doing factory support, so I was still effectively working every weekend, all the hours under the sun. But the guys who had been travelling since 1997 or something and they're going to get to a point and go, I just can't do it. I'm done. It's like, I've done my stint. And then you're going to start having less people bringing on the younger guys and giving them, spreading that experience and knowledge. So the quality is going to drop, which means then you struggle to get people in. And it's not just even in the kind of the bit you see, like the engineers and the pit crew. it's even things for in the kind of design office or the computer side of things, where you go to like a tech company and you go, the F1 teams don't offer the same kind of benefits or salary, but like someone who's a computer software engineer, well, I can go to Google and get 150 grand a year, plus I get a free lunch, I get free childcare, I get free this, and the F1 teams go, no, we don't offer that. And especially when they say, oh, and you have to work 23 weekends a year to provide support or something, and it's not going to happen. So I know, sorry, I've rambled on a little bit again.
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? Because I mean, I'm listening to all of that, and it's a real eye opener. Because, like you said earlier, you know, us fans, us mere mortals that watch Formula One, and we just enjoy it as a sport. Of course, we want to see as much action as we can, but yeah. I think in recent years, you know, you were talking about the 90s, and I grew up as a fan in the 90s. My earliest memories of Formula One was back in 1995, and obviously back then there was 50% less races than what we see now. And even then, we thought, okay, you never really gave too much consideration to the day-to-day of the people behind the scenes, people like yourselves, and so many people that work almost endlessly, as you've mentioned, to produce 2 Formula One cars that travel all around the world. And at the end of the day, the headlines usually go to the guy that's driving it on a Sunday. And not to take any light away from them, but of course, as I said, it's very easy to overlook all of the sacrifices and all of the work that goes into it. And then you fast forward to today, where that is obviously so much more intense and has gone up exponentially compared to where we were back then. And all we see right now is stories about F1 looking to pursue more races. Stefano Domenicali, who used to be a team principal at Ferrari, so you'd think he'd have that inside knowledge not too long ago, actually, to the point where you'd think, oh, maybe he'll be able to bring those lessons from that environment and then use that in his current role at F1 to try and make it better for those people working behind the scenes at the teams. But all we seem to do is hear stories about more races being considered for the calendar, or we might have to move races, like do all the races in one continent, move to the next. That was something that was introduced as a possibility before COVID. So I guess my question to all of that, from what you've just said, Mike, is do you feel right now that F1 are really listening to team members from those teams, or do you feel like it's hearing that, but it's just going on with the pursuit of trying to get as much action in as possible, and not giving teams the opportunity to bring in, at the very minimum, bring in more staff, especially in a cost cap era, to try and compensate for that? Because it feels like people like yourself and others are being hit with both barrels on this one.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I just want to like just clarify as well, because I always kind of feel like, because I'm a big advocate for this, because I love the sport. I wouldn't have worked in it for so long and without loving the sport, and it's a great job. Don't get me wrong. It's like when people come on to you and say, "Oh, you're moaning, you've got a great job. You could be like stacking shelves in Argos." And I was like, "Oh, I mean, I don't know if you can stack shelves in Argos, because you go to the counter and someone brings you it. Does that even exist anymore?" Yeah, it's like, okay. I was like, but I've worked. The people who are in F1 as well, they've worked hard to get to where they are. It's not just a case of you're lucky to get a job in F1. It's kind of, and you kind of think there's a lot of attitude which I've experienced. It was a few years ago, but like it was basically the kind of that same kind of aspect, but from higher up in the team. But like, oh, you should be grateful to have a job in F1. And then you kind of, every time a race gets added, like, there's no additional compensation for the team members. There's no kind of acknowledgement that you're having to spend even more time away from your home and family. There's no actual salary compensation from it. So effectively, you're now doing more work for the same amount of money. So you basically getting paid less. And like, I think it's more, not so much the kind of drive for it for people. Like, when I kind of raise a point on it, it's the lack of acknowledgement for the extra things the people who work in the sport are having to do. So they're giving up more time, because as well, it's not just a race weekend. We don't it's the fans who tune in for, I mean, obviously I know the hardcore will watch it Friday through to Sunday, watch every session, and fantastic. But from a race member, for every race you've got, you've got all your pre-event you've got to do, you've got all your post-event you do. So it's not just your 3 days in a weekend. And each race week itself, you can be pushing, as a team member, you're pushing a 80, 90-hour week. And so every race you get added, you'll go from your standard 40-hour week to a 90-hour week. So you're adding an extra over 100% on your work, what you've got to do. And I'll come back to it as well. It's like I'll say lucky or unlucky, what I say, but like I've got a very understanding partner who understood when I went away, and we don't have any kids, so it wasn't too big an issue. But I can understand other people as well that like they've got a young child at home, and then you're disappearing off, and then suddenly you're disappearing off for a triple header in 3 different continents, and you're like, when will I next see you? Oh, you see me in 24 days time. And then you've got the pressures of the job to go and do it, and also the guilt of leaving your partner at home to have to deal with your kids. And like, all right, you're bringing in the money and you're doing the job for you're doing it, but these added pressures all add up. And this is where I was saying before that you're getting people just drained and getting people burnt out, because it's not just the pressures of the job. It's the pressures of everyday life which come with it, and you're losing more and more time in your everyday life to kind of to deal with it. And I honestly don't think teams understand. I can't speak for all teams because I've not obviously worked with all teams, and I think some teams are doing a better job than others. From what I've heard, from what I'm speaking to, but I think some teams really don't listen at all. They're very much of the opinion of if you don't want to do it, we'll get someone else. And I don't like that attitude, and that's why I'm quite vocal on it as well. And then when you go to like the very upper echelons of the team, they obviously don't have that experience. They're traveling to it, they'll rock up at an event on a Thursday with possibly a private flight with them, and then they'll spend a few hours at the track, usually sat in hospitality, a couple of meetings here or there, chat to the media, go home. Friday night, same thing. They'll leave it early. They won't do the full stint. Saturday, Sunday, the same. All right, they're the figureheads. They're responsible for the day-to-day running of the company, but actually on a race weekend, they're not the ones kind of like, if it goes wrong, all right, they have the ones to answer the question, but they're not doing the hours that the other people are doing. And again, it's just this appreciation. And it's that same thing. I know it's the cash is king element of it, is that obviously more races come into it. Like F1 is now driven by shareholders. So obviously they have to return a profit for their shareholders. So getting more races in provides, obviously they can sell the TV rights for more money because you're going to be showing more races. So you get more money from TV all around the world. You get more money from people of the event holders. You'll get more money from tickets, which potentially, I don't know, I'm not up to that one. So you can understand why your F1 as a company is pushing for more races, because they have to answer to shareholders. They want to make money. And then you can understand the teams themselves have to go along with it, because the amount of money they get from F1 is based on the amount of money F1 makes. So it's in that kind of realm where it's totally different to us mere mortals as workers, who obviously we rely on the teams making money. So at the same time, we can't kind of say, we don't want to do more races. And we're like, well, it's what pays you wages. So again, long answer to say, no, I don't think the F1 is listening to the team's concerns about it, because they're basically saying that, well, that's how you get your money. That's how you get paid. That's how you get your salary. So you're going to have to deal with it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because... So, and sorry just to cut you off for the end there, because you obviously mentioned it, like, go to more races, this is how you're making money, there should be the incentive to do that, disregard all of those, difficult, not so much difficult working conditions, but working those long hours for a sport that you're passionate about, and this idea that you have to feel grateful for being involved in it just because it's something that from the outside in, it looks like the job that everybody would want to have. But obviously when you see the reality of that, it's not as simple as that, or it's not as glamorous as that, or covered in all the glitters and gold that you'd think would be covered when you see these Formula One cars go around a circuit. And I'm always curious to learn more about this, because as I said, I totally understand all of that. And as a fan, I feel like, you sold this idea, particularly I think last season or the season before, coming which one, where we had like 3 triple headers in the year. And that's insane. And obviously you've mentioned that already. And I think we've only got 1 this year. But even then, I often feel like, yeah, okay, location-wise, it's feasible, but you're not really giving that consideration to the teams and personnel that obviously, the work doesn't stop Sunday evening after the race when the race is finished. We don't just drop tools. Like you guys, obviously, you have to put the stuff away. You have to go through all of the data. You obviously have your debriefs and everything that goes with that. And then you're packing up, which can take a couple of days, and you've got to ship that over to the next venue and start again. It's constant. So I guess sort of, just to add a question to this, Mike, is there, not to put you on the spot either, but is there something that you think that could be done or that the F1 or the FIA should look into in order to improve that? Because it just doesn't sound sustainable, at least in the medium term.
I totally agree. I don't think it is sustainable. And I think we are going to start seeing, potentially even this year, we'll see. Well, we're already seeing it. We've seen it last year where you had issues with freight and you're getting people kind of struggling to get from, where was it, Mexico to Brazil, wasn't it, where the freight all arrived late. And the FIA and the F1's trying to help at the moment, because now they've increased the curfew times, which is fantastic, which is good in a sense. However, actually, when you delve into it a bit more, the teams still have the same amount of work to do now, but now they have less time to do it in. So now actually, it's like, I've heard stories where like this year that there's some teams where like mechanics are turning up on a track on a Thursday and Friday. And because the schedules are so compact now, because you've got these additional curfews, as soon as they get to track, they start work. And they're not able to they're literally getting some sandwiches brought into the garage for a quick snack, and they're continuing through. Whereas previous seasons where you've had the longer days, they've been able to at least take the breaks and go for the lunch and just get half an hour away from the garage. But they just don't have the time now to do that. So again, it's this consultation between it. They're trying to make an effort. They're trying to make a push towards helping out by doing these things. But actually, it's not. I don't think it's the right answer, because at the same time as well, increasing these curfew times is you say, like, I think the curfew, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's potentially 17 hours, the exclusion period from a Thursday to a Friday now, which means 17 hours away from the circuit, or once you take into a traveling time, 15 hours away from the circuit, which I think is great. I've got a bit of time to myself. But actually, when you think about it, I'm in a foreign country, away from my family. Potentially, I'm in a hotel in the middle of nowhere, so I'm not in a kind of nice, fancy hotel in the middle of a nice city. All right, this weekend, Miami's a little bit different. You've got some new places to go, and there are some places better than others. Like, don't get me wrong, again, it comes back to the part where it's a great job. There are some places F1 visits which are fantastic, and they're really nice places to go out to eat, see. But there's other people, it's like everyone's a little bit different, and you kind of get, I don't want to be going out in the city. I don't want to be going out to a bar. I don't drink, or like I don't fancy going down south. So now I have to sit in my hotel room by myself for the next 14 hours, and kind of that can be quite a lonely experience for some people. And it's little things like that, which is like the FIA and F1 are trying to make things. They look like they're trying to it, but I don't think the consultation's right on what they're going on how they're going about it. The next thing to do, in my idea, is like, and again, this is difficult because of the cost cap, and like you look at the size of the teams and just the feasibility of it, is that kind of you need to start rotating kind of roles. And some roles are possible to rotate. Like very much, you can have a pit crew or mechanics who you can have potentially, three teams, so 3 crews really. So you kind of always rotating in. Someone's having a few weeks off here or there, and that kind of works. But then when you get your race engineers or something like that, obviously your race engineers, your direct relationship with the driver, they can't miss a race. That's unlikely to happen. Strategist, potentially yes, but it can, if you've got a couple of good people in there, it's feasible for a strategy to rotate their role. Performance engineers, it's a little bit like the race engineer. They build up a relationship with the driver, more difficult for them to do it. So you have got certain roles in a team where you just can't rotate. And then the next one is, you then put it, but the guys who do the traveling or the guys who are going out there who can't rotate, then they have the time off in between races. So they literally just do the kind of Wednesday to Sunday or Wednesday to Monday if they're like kind of doing a pack up or that kind of aspect of it. And then the rest of the time they have off. But again, that doesn't work because you've got to do all your pre-event stuff. You can't just turn up at a weekend and go, right, where are we? Like if you turn up at a weekend in that kind of preparedness, you're going to be nowhere. So you've got to do all that work. So at that same time, it's kind of, that doesn't work either. So it's a really difficult aspect in to gain an answer for it. Like I said, some roles you can rotate, and I think you'll see, but the roles you can rotate we'll start seeing it more and more over the next few years. But there are some which you just can't. In terms of what the sport can do as well, I mean, this is also the annoying thing is when we did the 2-day weekend in Imola in 2020, every team loved it. Every like I haven't spoken to a single person in the paddock who went, well, that didn't really work. Like it was a good race. You had one practice session, straight into qualifying, straight into the race, 2-day weekend. You got there a day later. Everyone kind of felt a bit more relaxed because you lost the day.
I think the fans appreciated that as well, to be fair. Just as a little bit of a segue on that one, because obviously because of that less practice running, less time to optimize your strategies, it created that opportunity for a little bit of chaos in the pecking order.
Exactly, yeah. And it was I think it was unbelievable. Like I was shocked when they came out and said, no, it's a non-starter this. And like I haven't met a single person in the paddock from a team point of view who said that the 2-day weekend was not a good thing. And then for them, like F1's come out and go, no, that's scrapped now, we're not doing that. It's just like, if you're going to go down the road of wanting 25 plus races, then, because it does make a big difference. If you go to 2-day weekends, I do understand the past aspects of it where, we're losing out a day for the fans, but like of running. But how many people are actually interested in the kind of the Friday practices in terms of, it's great to see the F1 cast, but do something a little bit different then. The teams will still be there on the Friday because that's the day where the cars are being built and being set up. If you can have support races, you can still do F2, F3 on those days because they don't have as big calendars anyway, so they're not doing as much as the F1 team. So have F2, F3, and so have some sessions with other formula. Open up the pit lane, open up the paddock on that Friday for fans. So you're bringing fans in on the Friday and they can go and see, get closer to the cars and see it and advertise it that way. You take some workload off the F1 personnel, give fans more access in terms of the ones, because the argument against it was, we want to sell tickets for the Friday, we won't be able to sell tickets. But I can guarantee if you let, general admission, I'm not saying because you get some ones where you can do the pit lane walkabout, but get them being able to go down the pit lane and see the cars up close, or even get into paddock walkabout, just get that immersement. I went to an IndyCar race earlier this year and it was a fantastic, it's like how close they let fans get to the cars and just see it. And if you want to again, I've spread this to a few F1 fans and a few F1 fans say that'd be amazing. You actually get the chance to be up close with the cars rather than just sitting in the stand and watching them come by. You get that opportunity. If I bought a weekend ticket, I can go on the Friday. All right, I don't see any F1 car running, but that's Saturday, Sunday. I can still see the cars up close. I can see the mechanics working on the cars. I can walk through the paddock and kind of see the potential, the kind of, all the hospitality and all that setup of it. And that to me would be a perfect way to go. If you want to continue the process of doing your 24, 25 races, is 2-day weekends, because that takes away, say you're doing 25 races, you do 2-day weekends, even if you say, all right, 14 events are going to be 2-day and the rest we're going to leave as your conventional ones. So say example, if you go to a new circuit, it'll be a 3-day weekend or something. But if you still 14 races at 2-day weekends, that's an extra 14 days at home for the year. It's an extra 2 weeks where you're giving back basically to your team workers. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but actually over the grand scheme of things, it's something. And also, as well, you can potentially you can change the format up a little bit as well. It's like you can, if we're 2-day weekends, you can experiment stuff like having the race. Or I know Vegas is doing a race on a Saturday anyway, but why on a 2-day weekend you have practice on a Friday, practice and quali on a Friday, and then the race on a Saturday primetime TV? It's like
they're already doing it though, aren't they, with sprint races? And
this is, I mean, I never read a kind of a genuine reason for why the 2-day format wasn't a goer, other than it was just like, no, we're not doing that. That's been scrapped. That's all I saw. And I like it. It just shocked me that wasn't kind of argued for more, like from the team point of view, or just people didn't press on the kind of F1 side of things of why that wasn't a good thing for the sport.
Well, I suppose the hope for that is that perhaps that's something that will come up in the coming years, because of course we had the argument about sprint races. Should we have more sprint races this season? And I know the teams sort of blocked that for 2022 because they wanted more money, the budget cap to be increased to sort of compensate for that. And I can understand why the teams are thinking, well, we don't want more sprint races because that's just way more work in an otherwise impossible schedule, when we want to try and make things a bit easier for the teams and personnel. And because they've done the sprint races, they're already acknowledging that you can condense the weekend, and at least for the core running for the main race, into a Saturday and Sunday, and then have that qualifying or practice on a Friday. And then, of course, you have to rejig around the format for the junior categories as well. And then in addition to that, you mentioned as well, which I am a big fan of, this idea of having the cars in the garage for general admission for fans to come in there if they want to get a close of them. We already have that to a degree at this season, with the new teams having to bring upgrades on their car, and they have to put their cars out for everyone to see what's going on, and even a detailed description of what the upgrades are on the car specifically, so you can't hide anything. So even though, as you said, Formula One are sort of knocking those suggestions of a 2-day weekend back and those other ideas that you've mentioned, they're kind of already incorporating that without acknowledging the fact that they actually are. So I definitely think it's possible. And I, for one, as a fan, I would definitely be up for something like that, you know. And if it makes your lives easier behind the scenes, then that's another win for me.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, it doesn't have to be every race is a 2-day weekend, but like, if you want to, I mean, because if you are going to 25, 26 races or whatever it's going to end up at, it does obviously mean more back-to-backs or triple headers, but you can put it at least for, like, if it is a back-to-back or a triple header, one of them's at least a 2-day weekend, and like just takes that little bit, and it's kind of like, it's all about, like, it's about F1, it's about marginal gains. It's like you're always looking for little bits here and there, and just giving that a little bit of time back to people would be just, I think it'd be positive for the sport, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, Mike. And I'm sure a lot of people that have obviously brought this topic up have obviously mentioned that there is a greater need to try and incorporate more protocols, I suppose, or more plans like that to try and make lives easier for people working in F1. And I think that's something that's been overlooked for a long time. And I certainly hope in perhaps this season and perhaps another year or so, they might start incorporating procedures like that, because I do think, as you said, it is unsustainable. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to keep going and even pushing for more measures to have more race. I just don't see how that's possible. Hi guys, Adam here from DNF1. This is the end of part 1 of our interview with Mike Caulfield. I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, if you have, make sure to like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. Do the same, of course, if you're listening to us on your favourite podcasting platform. On part 2 of this interview, which goes live on Monday everywhere, Mike goes into detail of his working environment and memories of working with Mercedes and Haas, what it's like to work with drivers such as Michael Schumacher, Jenson Button, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, and of course goes into a bit more detail during the 2016 season between Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. It's certainly not one to be missed. I hope you can join us for that one on the DNF1 YouTube channel and all favourite podcasting platforms. But until next time, guys, stay safe, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next DNF1 F1 podcast. Take care.